We've all read the stories about adult content increasing violent behavior, but recent studies show R-rated movies may encourage kids to experiment with drinking and smoking.
I'm sure there was one or two movies during your childhood that your parents told you weren't old enough to see. Usually these are for logical reasons, because most 10-year-olds should not be watching stuff like Saw or Final Destination or Martyrs. However, if you grew up in the evangelical Bible Belt, chances are there were a few movies your parents put their foot down that did not seem rational to you at all, particularly some films that were explicitly made for children.
Boycott Disney!
Parents take to the streets to protest Disney.
The movie Peter Rabbit is playing in theaters across the country, including right here in Chattanooga. But one mom I spoke with says parents should think twice before letting their kids see it because of a scene in the movie dealing with food allergies.
It's not funny, and it's something that more people need to be aware of.
But before we get to those, I'm going to start with the more understandable film in this collection.
The next movie is Friday the 13th, the final chapter, an immoral and reprehensible piece of trash that sold more tickets on its opening weekend than any other movie so far in 1984, and that is a very, very depressing commentary. It really makes me sad to think of all those moviegoers spending $4.50, $5, most of them teenage kids, sitting there watching this sad, cynical, depressing movie.
My mom always detested Friday the 13th and would get upset when I would inquire about it and ask what was so bad. The way it was described made it sound like the most gut-wrenching, gory, and intense slasher of all time. And considering how sheltered I was, I had seen very little gore. So my imagination went wild and I figured it must be truly obscene, which in turn made me disgusted with my friends who had seen it in some of its sequels. How could someone watch something so demented, so evil? It turns out that my mom had actually been forced to watch the movie with her friends in an actual summer camp out in the woods when she was like 13. So that revelation really made everything click. She never revisited the film. And when I finally watched the franchise in my early 20s, I had a great time and told her that her childhood memories have distorted what the film is, and that it's a fairly tame and silly movie. She still does not believe me. Everything else after this are movies I watched this week for the first time for this video.
This holiday season, be part of the wonder.
Dinosaurs! Holy smoke, for real! They're real!
The magic.
Wow!
And the adventure.
They're in danger! We gotta save them!
Let's hang a Louie and head on back!
Steven Spielberg presents a dinosaur tale for the whole family. Cool. We're back. A dinosaur story.
You are great.
Rated G. Starts tomorrow at theaters.
This next one was a movie I would see advertised on a dozen other VHS tapes all the time. And considering our main source of weekend entertainment was going to rent tapes at Hastings, I had seen my fair share of 80s and 90s kids movies. So seeing a commercial for one I hadn't seen was more uncommon than the ones I had. We're Back, A Dinosaur Story was the one that got away. It looked striking to me, Big dinosaurs in New York City looks like a blast. So I asked my mom if we could rent it and she says no. No? What? It's not even PG. When I asked for an explanation, she didn't give me a proper answer, which confounded me further. I figured it couldn't be much scarier than The Land Before Time. These dinosaurs look nice. Oh well, eventually I dropped it. Well, it was time to see what I missed out on all those years ago. First off, I dug the sort of Jules Verne-inspired futurism going on in the beginning. Great art direction, nice, warm, hand-drawn animation. And we see that there's this time traveler who goes back and gives a group of dinosaurs some cereal called brain grain that turns them sentient so he can take them to modern day, all because there are children out there that wish they could meet real dinosaurs. Okay, simple enough, I guess. So now these dinos can talk and observe, and they consider this to be evolution, but really it just comes off more like magic than anything. So I'm wondering, is this really what my mom was upset about because they called it evolution? Surely there's more to this than that, because, this is on the same level as like a monkey drinking a magic potion and then speaking Shakespeare. Every kid's movie from this era has to have like the too cool for school type of boy character who knows his way around whatever city they're in and doesn't ever want to admit to being scared. I'm surprised this one doesn't wear his hat backwards. Well, he's run away from home and wants to join the circus, and for some reason, that's what the film is going to circle around. It's much more about him than the dinos, and I think that was a mistake. The dinosaurs get to New York and this boy is the first person they meet, and of course he accepts this scenario fairly quickly. Given the trailer and the poster, the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade seems to be the centerpiece of the film. That's when the one song of the film is sung, and it's what most people remember it for. So I assumed going in, the movie might head in a Escape from the Planet of the Apes direction, where it's about contemporary society accepting and interacting with sentient creatures who have traveled here from a different age. Hijinks ensue, some people get worried and upset, etc., But really, this is the only main sequence where the people of New York interact with these dinosaurs, because the rest of it involves this circus showrunner named Screw Eyes that runs a freak show sort of performance that has oddities and creatures and seems to freak people out on purpose. And this dumb kid decides, yeah, this is the exact kind of circus I want to run to. And him and his newly found girlfriend get easily lured into a magic contract and now have to be part of the show. First of all, without credits, this movie's only 64 minutes, so I'm wondering why the plot is going this direction and why we can't focus more on the living, breathing dinosaurs roaming New York. And second, I'm still waiting on something thematically to pop up that would make my mom so opposed to me watching this film. So Screw Eyes says he's going to devolve the kids, therefore turning them into... Okay, well, I see now. This is clearly every evangelical's worst nightmare. Funny enough, my mom had never had an issue with Planet of the Apes, which was viewed as absurd fantasy, but this is just too far. It did get me thinking though of how suburban moms knew back then about this stuff long before Facebook and social media fear-mongering. Because obviously she's never watched this movie on her own. I doubt she was in a Christian mother's email chain. She barely even used the computer back then. It was likely to have been word of mouth, which is crazy to think about. It's kind of mind-boggling things would get around so easily. I mean, every playground had that rumor about Marilyn Manson's rib, for example. But this also reminded me of that brief moment in the late 90s, when, in the middle of Pokemon's unstoppable cultural wave, there was a time when Christian moms were told to freak out about Pikachu and friends because technically, in Japanese, they were called pocket monsters. And keeping a monster in your pocket was demonic.
But why should they carry these monsters in their pocket?
How did this spread around so quickly? Well, sermons, of course. Sermons that would air on television. I actually remember being shown this one, and it was the first time in my little life I ever thought, nah, they got this one wrong. Pikachu is my friend. Thankfully, it was just a flavor of the week outrage, and my mom dropped it, and I got Pokemon Yellow for my Game Boy Color. But back to the movie. The dinosaurs decide to sacrifice their sentience to revert the boy and girl back to normal, and then become beasts for Screw Eye's freak show. And then Martin Short as the clown shows up and acts like he's been in this movie the whole time, and suddenly there's only 10 minutes left in the movie, and you're starting to feel like the original vision for this movie has been chopped down and that there might have been something more to this than there is. And apparently, there was a lot altered, according to John Malkovich, who was originally going to be the villain in the movie. He said the film changed a lot due to the bureaucracy of the studio system and the bottom dollar. Supposedly, he was disgusted with what the film turned into and dropped from the project. What really blew my mind is that apparently the key parade sequence and song number was a later addition that the studio requested and Spielberg adhered to. It feels like the movie is over before it could even get anywhere truly interesting. None of the dinos have an ounce of character development, and it's all concept and no substance. This would have likely been a one and done rental for 7-year-old me, so no harm, no foul this time.
I'm interested in this discussion about the religious aspect.
I'm very happy to believe that Jesus was married. And I know the Catholic Church has problems with gay people, and I thought this would be absolute proof that Jesus was not gay. I would have...
When Revenge of the Sith came out, that and Goblet of Fire, both being rated PG-13, really opened a lot of opportunities for me because I used them a lot as leverage when trying to see other PG-13 movies from then on out. Oh, it's like Star Wars, Mom, don't worry, you know how it goes. In middle school, I naturally started to become more interested in movies for grown-ups. And the movie everyone was talking about lately was some thriller with one of my favorite actors, Tom Hanks, in it. It kind of looked like National Treasure in my eyes. Surely it would be fine. The MPA rating didn't say anything about sex or sensuality. I would always check in advance to be sure before trying to lay my claim to a movie ticket. But this was no average thriller. This was, apparently, a slight against everything I and my fellow Christians stood for. This movie was made by the devil himself. This was the Da Vinci Code. I remember the controversy around this movie pretty well. It was a main topic at church for a good month without ever getting into proper detail of what was wrong about it. And yet, the fear-mongering worked and I stayed far away from this movie. Going in now, I was interested to see how negative the reviews were for the film and wondered if these reviews were from biased critics back in the 2000s or from regular critics who just thought the movie sucked. It was one of the highest grossing movies of the year. How bad could it be? Man, the first half of this movie is a slog. And I'm not saying the second half is that much better, but come on, man. They made two extremely charismatic actors somehow boring and unlikable. Tom Hanks' only character development is that he fell in the well as a boy, and Audrey Tautou is long ways away from Amelie. The mystery elements barely feel mysterious. Everything feels contrived and you can see the plot point outlined from the film's treatment on screen as they hit each beat. It really reminded me of those mediocre basic cable crime shows that boomers watch like CSI or NCIS, except with a bigger budget and even more exposition. This mystery they're trying to solve involves a Vatican cover-up of some kind, so I'm wondering what kind of revelation they're leading to that could cause this much outrage. I was bored to tears up until they get to Ian McKellen's house, who happens to be an insane expert on this exact line of history and research. I really dig when movies go into an alternate history direction, even if it's stupid or far-fetched. The big reveal that I had been waiting for is that Jesus got down. Yeah, that's right. He had a wife, Mary Magdalene, and guess what? Him and his wife had sex. Can't you believe it? Have you ever had sex with your wife? The audacity. Okay, so I had heard Mary Magdalene discourse before unrelated to this movie, so that wasn't that wild to me, and frankly it's not implausible. What would be so bad about Jesus having a wife? He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, let the man do what he needs to do. So basically this implies that Jesus had children and that the Vatican has been trying to wipe any proof of this from existence, so they hunt down anyone that might be related to Jesus himself. Do Catholics really think it's unrealistic that the Vatican would go to such extreme lengths to cover up things from the public? Either way, the funniest part to me is that the film is trying to act like it's not obviously setting up that the only female character with a mysterious past and dead parents is the descendant of Christ. I mean, as soon as Ian McKellen dumps this exposition, it's an immediate connection logically. And now we're stuck having to wait until the climax of the film for them to reveal this truth. This movie fails at almost all of the mystery elements here. Although to its credit, until I watched it, I had never looked that closely at the Last Supper, and that person does, in fact, look like a woman. That was interesting to me. The second half of this movie plays out more like an adventure movie with some stealth and some action, but all that tension falls flat to me because how obvious the reveal is. The Holy Grail wasn't a grail, it was a person, and she was here all along. Wow, cool. And I'm sure this reference has been made many times, but the whole time I was watching this movie, I was thinking about the superior adventure mystery film In Search for the Holy Grail. I'm sure you all know the one.
Do I have an agenda? I have the agenda of every storyteller, which is to make the reader turn the pages and read on to the end of the book. And I hope that when they've read the book, they will feel a little bit better for doing so.
This last movie came out in the middle of that flurry of children fantasy films from the mid-2000s that Harry Potter jump-started. Films such as Pan, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Aragon, Ella Enchanted, and now a film people would describe to me back in the day as Narnia, but evil. This is the one I fought for the hardest to see. Visually, it looked similar to Narnia, and I was all over anything fantasy in middle school, so I couldn't fathom what could be so bad about it. At first, my mom couldn't come up with a direct reason. She just heard from her friends that it was against the Bible, you know. The next time I tried to see about seeing it, my mom said no and told me that it was an evil movie where they kill God. Kill God? How could they do such a thing? I mean, how could they even be allowed to write such nonsense? That's not even literally possible. God would not even allow that to happen. How stupid. Wow, I would never go see this movie. Well, now I've seen this movie and I feel ripped off because where was the God killing I was promised? Well, it turns out that it was, of course, not true. Now, there is a plot in the third book apparently about going to war with God, but nothing remotely close to that is in this movie. I was looking for absolutely anything people could get upset about, but it just seemed to be all stripped out. I assume the studio got cold feet and worried too much about the box office and had them take out the very themes core to the story. If you can squint, you can see a little bit of the connection, but none of that commentary is damning. In the book, there's a controlling and evil church that goes by the magisterium, and in the movie, it's barely mentioned that it's a church at all, more so a ruling organization, whereas in the book, it's commonly referred to as the church. This book and film is a multiverse story where this universe is parallel to ours, but their souls exist outside of their bodies in animal familiars they call demons. I could see that name raising some alarms, but really that's about it. So, the magisterium suppresses knowledge about this life force called the dust that can visually be seen through the northern lights, seeping into this universe from ours, I think. And Daniel Craig's character wants to get funding from scholars for a proper expedition to see what it's all about. But the church doesn't want anyone to learn about it because I guess it would lead to scientific revelations about life and parallel worlds or something, and they don't want to lose control. Some of the world building is not entirely clear, at least to me. The magisterium wants to gatekeep knowledge. Okay, that's pretty basic, but that's as far as the commentary goes. As a kid, you'd already have to be a skeptic and critic of religion in the Catholic Church to make the connection here. I even found old articles talking about how the rationale behind the boycott for this film was not because the film was blasphemous, but because it would likely influence children to read the book afterwards, which is blasphemous. So it's kind of funny that New Line Cinema went to all of that fuss to strip down the movie and degrade the source material only to make no money anyway. I've never read the book, but I can still tell that the movie plays out like a very basic Cliff Notes version, because each set and sequence is as bare bones and simple as it can be, while still conveying the information needed and moving on. It is abysmally uninteresting, and I was sick of it by the time they got to the Arctic. The main character is Daniel Craig's niece, who is given a golden compass that can see the truth within people, before she's invited by Nicole Kidman to hang out in London for some reason. Going in, she seemed like she was going to be the main villain, but then she disappears from the movie after this girl escapes from her clutches, and then she doesn't even show back up until the last 20 minutes. Daniel Craig is out on the expedition in the Arctic, which is why I thought the girl was going out there to meet up with him and whatnot, but apparently it's actually to look for lost children or something. And she gets saved by this crew that take her out there, and they stop at every port, and every beat feels like, oh, we need to add this character to our crew, but we don't actually have time to organically introduce them or integrate them, so we'll have the girl talk to them for a minute and suddenly become inseparable partners. This happens with Sam Elliott's character as well as the polar bear, in the same location. It becomes jarring, and you start to wonder why they couldn't have taken an extra 20 minutes of runtime to flesh everything out. They end up finding the stolen children that are for some reason at this facility out in the middle of the tundra, and they have this machine in there that separates the kids from their souls basically. And you would think that this would be the core sequence of the movie and maybe slow down a bit, but I guess there was no time. They set up one of her friends to be at this place, which itself has a specific and interesting design, and feels like there's a lot of moving parts to the facility that we just don't get to explore. I really wonder how much of the book this part was. The only part I wasn't bored during was this neat little CGI bear fight. Everything else is so illogically plotted that I couldn't suspend my disbelief anymore. And I think that's because they filmed and structured the plot out of order from the book, maybe? That's what I heard, I think. And there's no proper climax. You think the whole time she's going to make it to her uncle, who's actually her dad, spoiler alert, and go with him to this dust and maybe explore the parallel universe or make some sort of important discovery or revelation or something, but she never even makes it to him. The movie instead has this Narnia-esque battle in the snow, and then ends on a cliffhanger that doesn't tie anything up, which was astounding. This movie without credits is an hour and 40 minutes. They could have made it just a little bit longer to have a proper finale, but apparently New Line cut the original ending, thinking it would be great to start the sequel with for some reason. It's truly bizarre. I looked up the deleted scenes that some fan painstakingly cut together with concept art and the audiobook, and it would have been an actual fairly satisfying conclusion, while still teasing the audience at what would happen next. This one is tough because I could see an interesting adventure movie somewhere inside of all of this if done right. But without the religious aspects of the book and no proper detail to be found, this movie just comes off more like a concept or a series of ideas than an actual film. Either way, you could probably see a trend here with a lot of the movies I wasn't allowed to watch growing up. Funny enough, Harry Potter was never a problem. I could never figure out why, but hey, I didn't dare question it.